This is the world according to Jen and Carolyn.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, Carolyn. Wow, you sound really excited.
This episode is fascinating, Jen.
It is.
It made me have a lot of feelings.
Yeah, fascinating is one way to put it. Today we're going to be talking about a real group of strange individuals. Not just strange, but downright dangerous. We're going to be talking about the gross-ass subculture of involuntary celibates, or incels for short. I think these guys are the worst. They're a bunch of weirdos who typically congregate in online communities to share their fucked up worldview and commiserate over how women don't want to have sex with them. But it's not their fault that they can't find partners. It's our fault. It's entirely the fault of women with their crazy feminist beliefs, and that's why they're isolated, can't get laid, etc.
Yeah.
How dare we deprive these men? So I think it's about time that we dissect this strange, sick, and downright dangerous world, because it's not only dangerous, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and this came up. I didn't know what it was, and you dropped this term during a podcast, and I was like, "What is that?"
Yep.
And then when I heard it, all of it was like, "Oh, I know what this is," but it's so many layers.
Yeah.
To what this is and what it isn't.
Yeah, and I think as we go through this, people are going to start to see a lot of similarities between this movement and other hate movements, because that's what this is. This is a hate movement.
Absolutely.
So, these guys, they're a real shitstorm of misogyny, entitlement and anger all rolled into a sad package of a human being that likely still lives in mom's basement at the age of 35, subsisting on a steady diet of fast food and rage. So
did the Twinkies make them do it?
No, it's not the Dan White Twinkie defense. But I'm sure they do subsist on a lot of Twinkies. So you might be asking yourself, what is an incel? So the Anti-Defamation League, which works to address hate and extremism, defines incels as heterosexual men who blame women and society for their lack of romantic success. Now, I think there's always been men who blame women for their lack of romantic success. So, however, like so many fucked up ideas, this one has definitely found fertile ground thanks to social media and online groups and, Reddit forums. And now they can form what we refer to, or what they refer to rather, as the manosphere.
Oh, I don't want to go anywhere near the manosphere.
Manosphere sounds absolutely frightening. It also sounds like something out of He-Man.
Yeah, or it's like the opposite of Wonder Woman's Island, Lesbos Island.
Oh, yeah.
It's the manosphere. It's like another Marvel character.
It's just
I don't want to deal with.
Did you say Marvel instead of Marvel?
Isn't it Marvel?
No, bitch, it's Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
No.
There's differences in that too.
Tomato. Anyway, so we've said this before and we'll say it again. The internet giveth and the internet taketh away. A lot of good has come out of the internet, and a lot of scary shit has also come out of the internet. So I think, as always, we're going to start with a history lesson. So according to CNN, the CNN article, despite its intersections with misogyny and overwhelmingly male groups, the person credited with coining the term incel was actually a woman. This woman, Alana, who is known only by her first name. I think she might be on record now with her first and last name. I can't remember. Or initially she was just a first name. Like Prince or Madonna. Incel Alana. Yeah, so it was, she first popularized the term in 1990s through a personal website called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project. And the term incel became part of the language she used with her followers as they discussed feelings of shyness and social awkwardness. So sweet. It was a really nice, supportive forum where people came together and talked about, being shy and socially awkward and, just having difficulty socializing, right?
Yeah.
A beautiful thing that turned real fucking dark once she lost control of it. So as the term spread, it began to take on different meanings. And in a BBC article, Alana said, I noticed people would talk about the lonely virgin and make silly jokes about people who didn't start dating in their teens. I mean, look at the 40-year-old virgin.
Yeah.
Everybody's favorite movie. That's exactly what it's about. She described the site as a friendly place, a simple website where she posted articles and ran a mailing list. Became a forum for men and women to talk about being lonely, where they could wonder aloud about why they couldn't meet anybody. It definitely wasn't a bunch of guys blaming women for their problems, she said. That's a pretty sad version of this phenomenon that's happening today. Things have changed a lot in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So how did an online, and it's been more than 20 years now, how did an online forum intended for awkward young people to connect turn into a flaming trash heap of masculine rage?
I love your writing.
So Wikipedia tells us the message board loveshy.com was founded in 2003 as a place for people who felt perpetually rejected or were extremely shy with potential partners to discuss their situations. It was less strictly moderated than its counterpart, Incel Support, which was also founded in the 2000s. While Incel Support welcomed men and women and banned misogynistic posts, loveshy.com's user base was overwhelmingly male. Over the next decade, the membership of loveshy.com and online fringe right-wing communities like 4chan increasingly overlapped.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Now we have problems.
Recipe for success.
Yeah.
Or disorder.
You can definitely see the shitstorm brewing here. In the 2000s, incel communities became more extremist as they adopted behaviors common on forums like 4chan and Reddit, where extremist posts were encouraged as a way to activate or achieve visibility. According to Bruce Hoffman and colleagues writing in Studies in Conflict and Terrorism, because this is a terrorist group as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
As edgy and extremist statements became more prevalent in incel communities, so too did extremist trolling and shit posting.
I like that.
I know. Some of their terms are really funny.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
When you said it was unmonitored, who's monitoring it?
It's probably internally monitored, whereas, Facebook, for instance, is looking for, and we'll get into this, and this is why there's so many incel terms that are kind of coded, because they're trying to outrun the moderators. So, we'll talk about this later, but Reddit, for instance, it was a really popular forum, and Reddit was like, you guys are done.
Yeah.
You guys are fucking terrible. So they started using code terms.
Well, and then they just go somewhere else.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is, I think this
Thank you.
What, so here's the Reddit part. So the incel subreddit, a forum on the forum website Reddit, later became a particularly active incel community. It was known as a place where men blamed women for their inceldom, sometimes advocated for rape or other forms of violence, and were misogynistic and racist as well. And in 2017, Reddit was like, nope, fuck this. We have a new policy. We're prohibiting content that encourages, glorifies, incites, or calls for violence or physical harm against an individual or group of people. So, shortly thereafter, they banned these motherfuckers. But at the time, they had 40,000 members. 40,000 members. That's crazy. So these fuckers just keep moving.
Yeah.
Or they stay on Reddit, and like I said, they just start using coded language so that the moderators can't detect them. They always seem to be one step ahead of the moderators. Right. So beginning in 2018 and into the 2020s, the incel ideology has been described by North American governments as researchers as a terrorism threat, and law enforcement have issued warnings about the subculture. A 2022 study published in the Journal of Current Psychiatry Reports and filed in the National Library of Medicine outlines some ideologies that tie these fucked up incel communities together. So one is an appearance-based hierarchy in which how one looks is considered the most essential key to both sexual relationships and one's place in society.
Interesting. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. Hitler. Totally, right? A belief in female hypergamy, the notion that women are too sexually selective. I think I'm saying that right.
Hypergamy.
Is that what it is?
I don't know. Hypergamy? I like that.
Write to us. Tell us. Women are too sexually selective and use their privilege and sexuality for social advancement above all else. We shouldn't be able to pick our partners.
Right.
We should have penises thrust upon us, whether we like it or not.
That's what the vagina is there for.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Just to intercept random dicks, no matter who they're attached to. Yeah. And third is a dislike of feminism. So as it was feminism that promoted and encouraged women to have a deserved right to sexual agency, there has been much discussion in incel forums dedicated to the reversal of gender equity. Many proposed solutions involve some form of coercion, rape, or a complete return to enforced monogamy under a strict patriarchal rule. It sounds like Republicans in Congress. It really does.
And what's her face? The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yeah.
This is like the start of the Handmaid's Tale.
This is their ideal society.
Yeah.
Though most of them wouldn't be generals and would probably be sent off that island to do manual labor or executed, hanged from the wall because they're such losers. Yeah. So be careful what you wish for, you incel fucks.
Yeah.
There's also intersecting and overlapping groups of other sad-ass men. One is called pickup artists.
Oh, God. And this was a show.
Was it?
This was a dude. I remember when I was reading, I was like, it was like a guy that looked like a magician.
That's my kind of guy. Wizard. It's like, let me do a card trick for you.
Let me show you how to peacock in a room at a bar.
So weird. It's so weird. It's like a train wreck.
Yes.
Like I cannot look away.
Yeah.
Yet it's literally jeopardizing our safety.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have to look at this because it's self-preservation. So the pickup artists compare to incel communities in that they feel men are owed sex and that women therefore need to be sexually available at all times. We're going to call them PUAs. It was popularized by somebody named Neil Strauss. The Game, I guess, was a book or something he wrote. And in contrast to the online-only incels, has a significant in-person component in the form of seminars and trainings.
Of course.
We have to infiltrate this.
Okay, we
have to
Can we dress up like men?
I think we'd have to. I don't think women would be allowed in.
And then minute, oh God, though. They'd be like, we smell vagina.
Oh God, they probably. I would be afraid for our safety, but I'm so fascinated. We have to have somebody. I'm going to make my husband infiltrate this. Like, husband, producer, you need to go undercover, get into this pickup artist shit. Okay, and then there's oh God, they had a website. It's now defunct called Return of Kings. Yeah, I bet they're all kings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Men's rights activists, MRA discourse is perhaps the most different from incels in that adherents do not define themselves by the status of their sex life or intimate relationships with women. MRA rhetoric focuses much less on sex, instead criticizing gender equality, women's rights, and women's status in society more broadly. Specifically, MRA communities believe men are disadvantaged by feminism. Some take this further and believe women's suffrage, women's right to education, and to life in public sphere, rather than just domestic sphere, have all contributed to declining status and power of men. Oh, cool. We should just be Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, seriously.
I can't go out without my male escort. What the fuck, dude?
God, this is so gross.
Yeah. So in contrast to both incel and the pickup artist discourse, MRA movements generally take a more concerted effort to formalize their discourse by framing it with academic terms. Ooh, we're trying to sound valid, thus adding a false sense of legitimacy to their claims. For example, a voice for men. One of the most visible MRA websites claims its mission statement is to provide education and encouragement to men and boys to lift them above the din of misandry. Misandry is hatred of men, which is so stupid, or like oppression, men's oppression. We all know men are so oppressed. To reject the unhealthy demands of gynocentrism.
Gynocentrism.
Dude, I need a shirt that says gynocentric. Like that's badass. That's so great. This is my new term. Ooh, we're going to start calling our podcast Gynocentric Entertainment.
I love it.
Amazing.
All
right. So, Carolyn, I think it's time for a psych break.
Okay.
Let's talk about the psychology here. What's going on with these men who hold these misguided, antiquated, and entitled beliefs?
Oh, I feel like you are asking me to help you understand NAMBLA, which is the National Association of Men Who Love Boys.
Oh, God.
You know,
I'm the North American Association.
North American. Oh, God. Okay,
get it right.
National.
NAMBLA's going to write in and be angry.
Cool. Oh, God. It's just, again, this is, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable in my body. I notice when I talk about this. And, you know, again, I'm also, as you're talking to, you're like, hey, this is Saudi Arabia. This is what I'm very happy to be in America, where I do have freedom of choice. And, you know, and I think these guys think that this is their First Amendment right. And again, that's not the intention of the First Amendment. You know, again, this is wrong. It just is. And it makes me as a woman feel gross. It makes me as a human feel gross.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I'm not a social media person per se. I'm not really a computer person. So I actually find that this often creates a barrier in therapeutic relationships when I'm dealing with kids who are growing up in a world that's really, you know, where artificial intelligence is already here, and you can fuck a fembot, and we've already sort of, you know, dehumanized a lot of things.
Yeah.
So,
well, porn has definitely contributed to the dehumanization of women.
Yeah.
Not all porn. There's some empowering porn, and it's starting to change, but...
Well, you're always going to see these dichotomies, right? And, you know, we are living in a changing reality, and there is a virtual world. There always has been. But there's this ambiguous immaturity that remains in chat rooms and remains in social media. And when it collides with the real world, that's when it gets violent, it gets hurtful, people get catfished, people get scammed, people get killed.
Yeah.
Right.
And well, in this case, these guys are picking up guns.
Well, and so that's the thing. If this was all just happening in this virtual space and they're all just chit-chatting, is it bothering anyone? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you can say, well, I'm not going to participate in this. And I'm going to start my own that's anti that.
Right.
But again, when you have this combination of something that's happening in a fantasy world and you're bringing it into reality, that's when I think there's a complication, and that's where it does have to be legally supervised.
Yeah.
And there has to be laws against this. So I want to make it clear that because we're talking about real people, I'm going to start saying this too. I am not diagnosing anyone.
Yeah.
I am speculating on what could be happening.
That makes sense. Yep.
So I want to do this breakdown that someone named Dr. Todd Grande, and he's a YouTuber who made his niche in connecting pop culture and mental health, and then adding forensic profiling, which kind of is what I feel like we're sort of doing. So I really like him. God, I hope I looked him up before I named this. I hope he's doing something weird. But yeah, that's why I
Surprise,
like him.
he's an incel.
I know, right? I really liked how he sort of put this together and helped me make sense of it. So he looks at two constructs going on in the definition versus the ideology of an incel. So very simplistically, we are looking at cisgender males who want to have sex with cisgender females.
Can you describe cisgender for folks?
Cisgender means you are born in the gender. I'm a cisgender woman. I have a vagina. I'm attracted to men who have penises, and I have sex with men who have
You're
penises.
biologically born a woman and you identify as
That's beautiful. Thank
female,
you.
I guess. Yeah, we're trying here.
I'm also open to other things too, FYI,
Yeah.
but so I guess I'm not really truly cis, but you know, for the purposes of it, yes, I am. And so these guys, and I actually think too, there's a similarity in being Caucasian. I found as well. I mean, again, that could...
Well, there's an overlap with these hate groups.
Yes. Yeah.
White supremacy hate groups.
So they're involuntary, and the involuntary part meaning they have no choice. And the celibate, they're actually using incorrectly, because celibacy is focused on the act of sex, when in reality, the root of the word celibate means someone who does not get married. And it's from ye old times where, you know, if you didn't get married, you didn't have sex.
Right.
You know, and don't get me started on that. But, you know, again, it's... you know, I don't want some youth group promise ring pastor to get mad at me. But it's important to focus on the ideology spectrum or continuum that exists in this construct of the incel community. So when you started talking about Alana, that's the low end. These people are not violent. They have a self-regulation. They are lonely. They feel like they don't fit in. They're frustrated. They can't find someone to love. I'm waiting for you to sing Queen.
No.
Find me somebody to love.
It's not that kind of episode.
They're being romantically rejected is hurtful. It sucks. I've had that happen. I've liked people who haven't liked me back. It's painful. But what everyone else seems to have, and what comes easily to other people, this is where this community finds sort of their their comfort, like in sort of offering hope and support and maybe even skills on how to do this well. But then as you drift further along the continuum, there may be less openness to experiences and extroversion and agreeableness and more personality disorders, as well as even some more neurodiversity that actually is making it's not just, oh, I've been rejected, now I'm a little bit kind of shy about talking to someone. They might actually truly have anxiety and social skills that don't translate. Yeah. And as someone who doesn't have that problem, that's very difficult for me to understand, but I can relate, it's very difficult for me to relate to, but I can certainly empathize that's difficult. Yeah. And again, as you go further along that continuum, that's where we see violence, terrorist extremism, men who are really truly male supremacists. They believe that it's their right as a man to have sex and that they are being denied that right by women, and that makes them extremely unhappy. And this also makes me wonder how many of these men seek out sex workers and what kind of online porn they're exposed to. And at what age this occurred. Yeah. Again, once that, we don't have a lot of, it's that sexual window opens a lot sooner for us, which I think has its pros and cons too. Yeah. But also it makes me wonder who's funding their lifestyle. Yeah. One of the gentlemen that I was looking at from a BuzzFeed article was saying, I spent 2 days in my room just on this community up for 2 days. It's like, you're not sleeping, you're in a dark room, you're not getting fresh air.
That's healthy.
And he's showing his bed that's not made and some just, it looks like a teenager's messy, gross bedroom. And I'm thinking, how are you affording rent? And what do you do? And, so it just brings up a lot of questions that, again, in the spectrum, you're going to see that, that variation.
Yeah. That makes sense. And something you said made me think of something that you do in your therapeutic practice at the horse ranch, because you work with young adults on the spectrum, neurodivergent young adults. And you talked about the sex positive groups that you have, which I think is so important, right? Because if folks, no matter who you are left to their own devices to kind of figure things out on their own, or not on their own, but with the help of just porn and some of the denigrating images that are displayed in porn, right. You got to wonder, like, oh, you're not getting a healthy idea of what relationships and sex and love look like.
And maybe that has to be taught. Yeah. And shown. It makes people really uncomfortable when you're teaching their 25-year-old about a vibrator. Yeah. And it's like, but this is a woman. Yeah. Yes, she has Down syndrome, but she's still a woman. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with her vagina. And why shouldn't she have pleasure? Yeah. And it makes the parents really uncomfortable.
I can imagine.
Makes communities really uncomfortable. Makes grant proposals really uncomfortable.
For sure. But I think you guys are doing really good work in that sense, because you are sexual. Most people have the capability of being
if they want
sexual
to be. If they want to be. And they shouldn't. And if we're teaching them social skills, sex should be part of that. Totally. And dating should be part of that.
I agree. Yeah. All right. Big digression, but I thought it was connected.
It is.
So this is fascinating to me. So I mentioned that these incels have their own language. So let's dissect a little bit of incel slang, shall we? Now, it sounds like these assholes really love the Matrix movies, or at least elements of them. Dude, the Matrix is something to all groups. I swear to God, in my grad school program, there were so many people, including professors, who were obsessed with the Matrix and like.
Do you know I've never seen it?
I've never seen it.
I feel like I need a fucking calculator
from beginning to end. Yeah, dude. Anyway, so they really like the Matrix. Okay. And that CNN article I mentioned earlier talks about, one of the most important symbols in the incel community is the idea of a red pill or a blue pill. This metaphor is taken from The Matrix, in which Keanu Reeves' character Neo must choose between taking a blue pill, which will keep him in a state of peaceful ignorance, or a red pill, which will awaken him to an uncomfortable but enlightening reality.
Alice in Wonderland shit.
Pretty much. That's where it's derived from. All I can see is Lawrence Fishburne in my head with like his hand extended with the pill. There's some pretty cool characters in that movie. I probably should watch it from beginning to end.
Research.
Yeah, research. So for incels, the reality presented to them by the red pill is that love and sexual satisfaction are commodities that women deny them, and that women, not men, control the sexual aspects of society. Under this assumption, sex and relationships become almost like a game with specific challenges to overcome. And we talked about that in our online dating episode with the way that people date these days or select partners or at least their dates. It's a game. Tinder, all these apps are set up like a game to stimulate the same parts of our brain that a fucking game does. Yeah. These are human beings. Yes. This is sex, love, and relationships. To put it on level with a game, dangerous.
Well, and I'm sorry, but men do control all aspects of sex in this society in many ways.
They do. Absolutely.
So that's what blows my mind. I'm like, but you guys do.
We just had our federal right to do what we want with our bodies revoked. Yeah. After 45 plus years of having that right encoded, essentially in our democracy. And it's
hypocrisy. Even though all those fuckers probably did under the table abortions to have their people.
Of course.
Kids,
their mistresses.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but the rules don't apply to them.
No.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So when people are described as red-pilled, it means they have accepted this reality. The metaphor of red pills and blue pills is also used among other groups associated with the alt-right, including QAnon, believers and other conspiracy theorists. The black pill is similar to the red pill, but describes a more nihilistic view that the reality of the red pill is unavoidable and unchangeable. Ooh, we're so deep,
They're getting so Nietzsche, right?
Oh, God, so stupid. Yeah.
I think that's what he had in mind.
No, I don't think Nietzsche could have ever conceived of this shit. All right. So some other examples of incel slang are chads, used to refer to attractive masculine men that incels perceive as top of the male social hierarchy. There's Stacies. These are attractive women atop the female social hierarchy. These women are to be both desired and scorned. God, we can't do anything right. As in incel culture, attractive women are the reason for their sexual failures. Then there's looks maxing. Some groups of incels are less concerned with perceived social and political reasons for their situation. Instead, they focus, whether positively or negatively, on their own perceived flaws. Looks maxing is the act of getting as attractive as one can through grooming, style, or exercise. Incel communities share overlap with other online communities where young males meet and can see the influence of video game culture in words like this. Other things can be maxed in this way, like wealth or personality. All I can see is Patrick Bateman in my head.
Totally.
Like having sex and looking in the mirror and pointing at himself.
Oh, yes.
That's all I can see. There's femnoids or FHOs, short for female humanoids or female humanoid organism. That just makes my skin crawl.
God.
These terms are intended to dehumanize and belittle women, not only as lesser than men, but as less than human. Great. AWALT, AWALT, all women are like that. Again, used to generalize and stereotype. Hypergamy, taken from animal biology and inaccurately applied to women. Hypergamy is the concept of mating upwards. Some incels believe women are hypergamous and therefore will always seek relationships with men of higher status than themselves or than the men they are currently with. Well, dude, we don't want to date some loser that...
I know. So what if they do?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want the guy who lives in his mom's basement and subsists on a steady diet of fast food and is on hate forums all day. Sorry, you're not my type.
Posting.
Yeah, sorry, I want a guy with a real job who's actually trying to make a positive difference in the world.
And doesn't want to rape me and thinks I owe him sex.
It doesn't think
I don't matter. I'm a femboid.
Fembot doesn't.
Well, this is very video gamey. That's interesting.
It is, and I think again it speaks to their maturity level. So, and then there's branch or vine swinging. Tying in with hypergamy is the generalization of women as branch swinging or vine swinging, which essentially accuses women of always seeking better men and swinging from one relationship to the next for opportunistic reasons.
Men do this too. Everyone does this.
Yeah.
You do this with jobs.
Right. Hey, this isn't the right person or the right job for me. I'm going to move on because that's the mature thing to do. Yeah. Oh, and do I want somebody better than, I don't know, the guy with narcissistic personality disorder that I dated who was constantly treating me like shit and calling himself dark and broken? Yeah, I kind of do want something better than that. Sorry, assholes.
So they don't like people who seek out success for themselves.
Yes.
Now, again, there's a way to do that kindly. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's nice when people do that and aren't clear with their agenda.
Sure. Or if you're solely materialistic.
Absolutely.
You know, and you're solely seeking out a partner for what they have on a material or a financial level, but everybody does their own thing.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes people are in relationships where this is known and discussed, and it's totally fine.
Yeah.
You know, as long as there's transparency in whatever you're doing and you're not hurting each other.
And that takes maturity.
It does.
I don't think I date the same that I did when I was 20.
Fuck no.
That I would now. And I don't love some of the things I've done, but
of course not.
This is really the way that, again, adding a name to something depersonalizes it.
Yeah, well, dehumanizes it. Yeah, totally. And growth is a part of development and evolution, and you're supposed to grow and you're supposed to change.
And they stop and then they say, we're not going any further and it's your fault.
Yeah. Yep. It makes
you rejected me.
Yes. They are, the stagnation in their development is theirs and theirs alone.
Yes.
It's their fault, but they want to project outward because people want to be victims a lot of times.
Yes.
So the manosphere, this is from an MIT Tech Review article. The manosphere, as it's known, is divided into 4 broad groups. Men's rights activists claim that family law and social institutions discriminate against men. Men going their own way take this feeling of grievance further, arguing that society can't be amended. They often avoid women, blaming them for their problems. There's the pickup artists, which we mentioned. Meanwhile, date and harass women. They believe society is feminizing men. And then there's our favorite group, the incels, the most potentially violent of the group. Incels abide by the black pill, a belief that women use their sexual power to dominate men socially. For that, incels want revenge. The team's analysis found that the manosphere is evolving and fast. Over the past 10 years, the population of men identifying as men's rights activists, traditionally older and less violent, is falling, while younger, more toxic pickup artists and incel communities have seen a spike. Worryingly, it seems that there have been a significant migration from men's rights groups into incel groups. Every year since 2015, around 8% of men's rights activists, or the other ones, the MGTOWs members, appear to have become more radicalized and join incel groups online. These fuckers love Reddit, as I mentioned, and Reddit's tried to shut them down, but they've gotten smarter by using terms such as the ones that I described. So I think their terminology is always evolving just to stay one step ahead of the moderators. Okay. So incels often use seemingly innocuous language, as I mentioned. One common trope is spinning plates, used by pickup artists who date as many women as possible. To a casual observer, these words might mean nothing. To a wannabe incel, they're a sign that he's ready that he's come to the right place. So, okay, let's talk about mental health. We touched on this briefly. So that same CNN article is full of great information, and it's linked in the show notes. The mental health issues, isolation, bitterness, and misogynistic thinking that often characterizes incel culture can lead incels to align themselves with increasingly extreme beliefs. Experts and studies have noticed incel culture frequently intersects with far-right ideologies and white supremacy. Carolyn, can you talk a bit about how social isolation and a feeling of not fitting in can lead to subscribing to extremist and violent ideologies?
Well, and I think that on some level, all of us can hopefully empathize with that piece, where there was probably a point in your middle school or high school life, maybe even college too, or at certain times in your life where you haven't really fit in and you've had to figure out socially how to make that work, right? And through that trial and error is how you build confidence and go on, right? So if you've ever felt a little left out in some sense, try and tap into that as I talk about what I'm going to talk about, okay? So I want to tell a little story. A professor I had in grad school tried to help us understand this concept of empathy when we might find that something our client is doing is we're judging it, or we're going, ew, that's gross, or ooh, I wouldn't do that. Yeah. How do you sit and hold space that one, not traumatize yourself, and can I sit and hold space for this? But how could you see kind of the deeper purpose in the behavior, right? So she talked about a man that she was asked to see who was, it was a court order. He was a peeping Tom. And at first she felt really icky. She felt really uncomfortable, obviously. And so she really tried to put this feeling of, hey, I'm just going to listen to him and I'm going to kind of hold that ick. And she would say, like, I'm going to hold in a little tiny little baby hand and like just put it over here. And I was like, a baby hand? I just thought that was weird.
I don't like that visual.
Well, but she was like, babies are very curious and they're not just, whatever. whatever. But she learned through talking to him how lonely and isolated he felt.
Okay.
And that for years, he was on the spectrum and he felt really, and I want to be really careful that doesn't mean that you're going to turn into that, right? Let me just preface that.
Yeah.
Not everyone on the spectrum is going to be a peeping Tom.
Yeah.
But that he really wanted to be close. And this felt like the only way he could do that without getting hurt. Mm. He knew it was wrong. He, again, coming from our last episode, he knew it wasn't right, but it was his way of having a connection that wasn't pornographic.
Okay.
And real. And so she was kind of like, if you can connect to that, that's how you would help someone.
That makes sense.
Okay. So, right? But not really, because to get to that idea, this is the drive to connect. It's not unique to this guy. Yeah. And most of us wouldn't go to that extreme. Yeah. Right? So remember earlier when I talked about this continuum of this ideological thinking, what if, and I read this article that was brilliantly titled, One is the Loneliest Number, written in 2023, the National Library of Medicine confirms this lower end, that social isolation, social anxiety, loneliness, rejection, and again, I think we all can relate to this at some stage where you struggle to connect with other peers and experience rejection. But ideally, this is what helps you develop resilience and a sense of self, and you find grounding and go, well, that wasn't the right person. Let me move on. It's not me. Or what can I do to work on this in order to connect better? But imagine if you never fit in. You always get rejected. Your resilience is going to go down. Yeah. And then you have a skewed way of thinking. You could possibly be suffering with other mental health barriers, such as anxiety, depression, isolation, addiction. These guys are definitely addicted to their community and their computer. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, except for when, again, if you only eat broccoli 24/7, that's not healthy either. You have to have variety. Yeah. So when we look at neurodiversity, or, you look at populations that maybe do have a harder time connecting, it's going to come up possibly as something that was, I think a lot of this was maybe missed in childhood. Sure. Misdiagnosed or missupported. And then you get parents who go, well, they found computer games and they really love it. And they found this community and they found all these things that are really great. And that's great. Is it everything though, right? So, but we look at their environmental system, nutrition, exercise, family, a good healer, whether you're a doctor or a social worker or a mental health therapist, you should be looking at all these systemic factors, not just the person sitting in front of you and what they're telling you. Yeah. So even if you feel these things and have a support system, which would typically be your family, and your personality and mental health realities don't facilitate reaching out, working with, let me rephrase that. The fact that you're going to have all those social anxieties, is that going to make it easy for you to reach out to sit with a female therapist in a room where you're staring at each other? Yeah. No. Yeah. And again, that's if you had all the resources, all the family, all the people who go, hey, this is seemingly not okay. Yeah. In the mental health community, we're still learning what's the right way to work with someone, and there's a lot of confusion. Yeah. How do we make you feel comfortable, and how do we challenge you? Yeah. So, traditional therapy might actually not work for these guys. If I had someone call me up and tell me this, my reaction would be, I don't want to work with you. Ew. And so where do they go?
Yeah. I mean, if they already feel, and I can't, I don't have the stats to back this up, but I remember the composition of your class, for instance, and it was primarily women. Oh, yeah. Who are training to be mental health professionals. Yes. And we need more men, and we need more men of color in particular to go into this field. Yes. And so if you have people, like you said, who are grappling with feelings of awkwardness, inadequacy, whatever, particularly relating to the opposite sex, then yeah, you're going to have a dearth, a real shortage of people that you could potentially connect to in a therapeutic environment.
Or you're going to have therapists with really good boundaries, who can work with that attraction and not get icked out by it. Yep. If that makes sense. Process that, hey, it's normal to like me. What do you like about me? Well, I listen to you and I'm kind to you. So you need to find women then who do that too. Yeah. And I have a good intention, and there's a boundary. Interesting. We have rules about how you contact me, when I see you, when I don't. Let's apply that to this new relationship you have. Yeah. Yeah. But that's on that lower continuum. As you go up and up, it's going to be harder and harder for them to connect to other people because they're giving off that signal of, well, I don't want to be around you.
Well, the further they become immersed in this community and this violent ideology, it seems like the more and more they're going to want to isolate, and the more and more they're going to try to connect with this community, and this community specifically.
Well, and women are going to be confirming. Again, this is where you're getting to that paranoia.
Yeah.
You're actually, if you meet me at a bar and I'm like, no thanks, dude. Like, I'm going to go over here.
Yeah.
I may have not done that very nicely. And now I've basically grounded that feeling you have that you're going to get rejected by a beautiful woman. Sorry, I'm a beautiful woman. You know what I mean? Though, but
reinforcing
now I've reinforced it, and now they're going to go back. And so I'm not saying that that's right.
Of course not.
But that's what's happening in their cognitive dissonance, which is then that is their reality, and they're going to project that reality onto everyone. And that's where you're looking at personality disorder and psychopathy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where these fuckers can be real dangerous. So, while most are keyboard warriors who probably seldom leave their parents' basement, there are some incels who've committed some really heinous acts of violence. And here are some of the more well-known examples. So over the past 10 years or so, several incidents of mass violence have been perpetrated by men who identify as incels or publicize their beliefs in male supremacy. So there was a dude named Elliot Rogers. I think he's probably the most well-known. He went on a stabbing and shooting rampage in Isla Vista, California, which is UC Santa Barbara. Both you and I have been to Isla Vista. In 2014, he was a self-described incel. And after the attack, which killed 6, injured more than a dozen, and ended with a 22-year-old's death at his own hands, Rogers became a celebrity, inspiration, and meme among incel communities. Other incidents also show that incel behavior and its violent consequences aren't limited to the U.S. The man behind a 2021 van attack in Toronto that killed 10 spoke of an incel rebellion to overthrow the Chads and Stacys. He also called Roger the Supreme Gentleman. A man who killed 5 during a shooting rampage in Plymouth, England in 2021 expressed solidarity with incel culture and had a fascination with violent men. The U.S. Secret Service's National Threat Assessment Center said in 2022 that it would further investigate incel ideologies while citing the 2018 case of a 40-year-old man who attacked a hot yoga studio in Tallahassee, Florida.
I remember this one.
Oh, God. Killing 2 women and injuring 4 others before shooting himself. The people were Maura Binkley, 21, Nancy Van Vessem, 61. They were fatally shot when a gunman opened fire in their hot yoga class. 4 others were shot and 1 pistol whipped before the gunman fatally shot himself.
Christ.
Jesus, not even fucking yoga is safe. And it's not just the U.S., as I mentioned. Last year in Canada, they announced terrorism charges against a 17-year-old Toronto resident for the murder of a 24-year-old Ashley Noel Arzaga at a massage parlor. An attack law enforcement said was motivated by incel extremism. It was the first time Canada had charged anyone with incel-related terrorism. A Guardian article I read made some interesting points regarding the appropriate response to these extremists. Some experts are skeptical of the value of approaching the incel movement through a counterterrorism lens rather than a public health problem. They don't want to, this person said, we're seeing a risk in making the movement look like a bigger deal than it is. But I think it's a big deal. We're talking about years ago, a Reddit forum that got shut down, that was up to 40,000 people before it got shut down. That's a big movement.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Incels display a very high level of mental issues, as we kind of talked about. They display high levels of a history of bullying. This is, I think, of being bullied rather than being the bully. This is a movement that is desperately sad. At the same time, incel violence is ideological violence against civilians to prove an ideological point or create psychological fear. That makes it terrorism. Those are some of the components of terrorism. Another component that I'm familiar with is it has a political objective, which, as far as I'm concerned, with these guys critiquing the way society currently is set up and how much power women have, there's a political agenda baked into it, especially since their political agenda happens to align with a lot of these men and women on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
Fuck this shit.
Yeah. So, and these guys now have access to weapons.
Oh, well, that's the huge problem, right? Like, this is why I think, Canada's a lot different than we are.
Yes.
So we're seeing one instance in Canada where I turned on the news this morning, and unrelated to incel violence specifically, I'm watching story after story of gun violence. Sorry, guys, it's the fucking guns.
Yeah.
We're going on record and we're saying it. We're not trying to take away all your guns. You just don't need a motherfucking AR-15, a weapon of mass destruction. No. That's not what the Second Amendment's about. Anyway, I'm not going to go on a Second Amendment rant. We'll save that for another episode because I am writing one about that. So, Carolyn, there's a 2022 study published in Evolutionary Psychology Science, which surveyed a sample of self-described incels. Researchers found, this goes to your, what you thought, 75% of the incels they questioned were clinically diagnosable with severe or moderate depression, and 45% with severe anxiety. Let's talk about this from a clinical perspective a little more.
Well, I started mentioning personality disorders, and much of the current research does align. It's occurring more and more extreme in the incel community. And remember, in our narcissistic personality episode, if you want to go back and listen, because it rules, this is going to feel a lot like that, what we talked about, vulnerable narcissism. Not always with these guys, but these dudes have some of the classic symptoms that you would see: resentment, shame, hypersensitive, a self-hatred and an anger, but it comes from rejection and possibly trauma. Again, I'm not excusing their behavior, but I'm always going to look at, how was this person made? What happened to them? This is not typical. The average person, although this is changing, and again, my community is not this group, so again, I need to explore more, but I don't want to. Where you have individuals with this extremely low, what we're going to call low openness to new experiences. This is what's interesting with diluted psychotics. They might be a little bit more open to a new experience, but these guys don't want to try something new. They're pretty content with their feelings. So what's going to motivate them to change, right? Low conscientiousness. To me, hearing that someone got killed because someone else did it does not make me think, wow, that guy rules. What a champion. But I would have said the same thing about Hitler, and there are people who followed him too. And now that we have hindsight is 360, right? Or 2020. But we have to take this shit seriously. History is repeating itself, and these are cycles. That
a lot of these guys love Hitler.
Yeah. Weird, right? And so low conscientiousness, which means I'm not sure what their morality and their values are, which is always a little frightening in a society that needs to kind of have a shared moral system, right? Low to no extroversion. They're not agreeable, which that reminds us of sociopathy. And another factor that I thought was particularly interesting is high neuroticism.
Interesting.
Paranoid, schizoaffective, and something called schizotypal, which was really confusing to me when I was learning that in school.
I remember that too,
You don't see it very often, but when I watched the video of the Santa Barbara guy, I was like, you're different. Like, my body doesn't know how to read you. My body is confused. Something's off.
Well, as a mental health professional, I think you're even more in tune to recognizing when someone has mental health challenges, to put it mildly.
So, like I said, some of these dudes on shows like Vice, they're displaying things that would make me go, why are you shutting yourself in a dark room with a computer? Why are you isolated? Why are you doing these immature, what I would kind of call odd behaviors? They were talking about some guy who they thought it was funny that this is his thing. He takes his dick out and then he poops on the bed.
What the fuck?
Right? Like, that's not funny, but I've kind of watched adolescent dudes.
Was it the Johnny Depp trial? Like, what's going on, dude? Did we learn nothing? You don't shit in someone's bed or your own bed for that matter.
They all think this is funny. And, again, and a lot of these guys threaten this is a high suicide population. And they actually do threaten to kill themselves, and many often do. And that's very glamorized in that kind of in between
like martyrs.
Continuum. Yeah. So I absolutely think there's mental illness and personality disorders. And like I said, it's kind of very Hitler-esque to me. And I think that's what gives us the icks, not just because I'm Jewish and I'm a woman and I'm a spiritual person in a human body. But, you know, when you see any group of people think they deserve something that another group ruined and they should die, that should scare you.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know how to explain to someone when that doesn't scare them. To me, something's right. I don't know how to have a discourse with you when that's where you're at.
Well, we've seen too many times in human history the jump from ideology to action.
Yes.
And the Holocaust is only one example of when that's occurred.
And it's only popularized because it was white Eurocentric.
That's right.
Let's look at damn it. I was going to sound like I knew history.
Cambodia,
thank you.
Yep, the killing fields.
Cambodia, Armenian genocide.
Oh, yeah. It is, and we were talking about this before we started recording. It is easy to other another group.
Yes.
When you deliberately don't interact with that group, and when you start assigning negative attributes to that group, and more than assigning negative attributes, you start blaming that group for your failures, just like Hitler and his propaganda team was successful in doing with our people.
Yes.
They're the reason for all of our problems.
Yep.
And then once people start to believe that, then all hell breaks loose.
Yep.
You have potential for some really deadly, fucked up shit.
And these guys write manifestos.
Yes.
They are idly worshipped and worship idyllic for their violence.
That's right.
And they act out of this sort of like provocative, like kind of pay attention to me feeling that's just so immature.
Yeah.
No wonder women don't want to be with you. You're not... If I'm looking in the animal kingdom, no, you're not going to mate with the immature male.
No.
Or the immature, you're going to mate with the one that can offer you the most safety and protection. I don't feel safe with a guy like that. Why would I want to have sex with you?
No. And often these guys get what they want, the ones that actually like leave their parents' basement. Like I'm thinking of David Koresh. We just watched that documentary. And David Koresh was obviously unhinged, somewhat more charismatic, but achieved, and with children too. Yeah. He had his needs taken care of, his sexual needs, through coercion, through rape, through getting these folks to buy into this ideology that he was Jesus himself, and it was only through force, coercion, manipulation, fear that he was able to gratify his fucked up sexual proclivities.
Yeah. Well, and what bothers me, Jen, is that this is often talked about like it's free speech.
We have to draw the line somewhere. And I am a huge proponent of the First Amendment. But going back to NAMBLA, for instance, there's two things I write on the ACLU about. One is conservatorship, which we talked about in our mental health episode. The other is them siding with the North American Man-Boy Love Association, who had been kicked out of public libraries where they were having their meetings and talking about their feelings of wanting to rape and molest little boys. And the ACLU cited in their favor, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, and saying, you know what, this is free speech, it's protected, they can meet in this public place and they can have conversations about this.
Children?
Where there's children, yeah.
I'm sorry, but I don't think that's what the Declaration of Independence was talking about.
I don't think so. Yeah.
That's too far.
And maybe some white dudes in the 1700s who owned people, maybe they weren't the end all and be all of what our law should be.
Maybe we should
nowadays.
grow a little bit.
Yeah.
Why are we so afraid to say no?
Well, it does become with the First Amendment, and I'm not going to go too deep into this because we have to wrap it up. It becomes a slippery slope. And I know that's very cliche, but it does. Who
decides what is and
who decides, and also where do your First Amendment rights begin and end? And where does it become oppressive? And where does it become protection?
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of courts feel similarly, and Reddit and Facebook, it's like when you start making violent proclamations. I want to rape, I want to murder, and it's focused on particular people or groups of people, that's when you're going way past the First Amendment.
Because if you did that in IRL, that's assault.
It's a threat.
Yeah, that's a threat.
You're making a threat.
Yeah.
So anyway,
okay.
Just to kind of wrap this up, because I feel like we can go on all day about this, because it's fascinating from obviously a number of different angles.
Yes.
But, you had mentioned this. It's important to understand the psychology of why these assholes do and say what they do. And it's not the same as excusing their reprehensible behavior. I feel like this is what our show is largely about. We seek to understand why people do what they do. And because us women have to stick together, we want you all to know what kind of crazy shit is out there so you can protect yourself. This is a quote. This is an ideology. It's not a psychological disorder. This is Alex DeBronco, I think, said this. There's a lot of undue sympathy. This is what the executive director of the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism. There's a thing.
Damn, I don't want to work for that.
That sounds fascinating, but also simultaneously scary.
It's triggering.
We have zero empathy for these assholes. And unfortunately, facets of their beliefs are everywhere because their philosophy largely hinges on depriving women of rights. Again, look what happened to Roe v. Wade, that piece of shit DeSantis in Florida, reducing our right to get an abortion to like the 6-week mark. Like there's more so, it comes in it ebbs and flows.
Yes.
And right now I feel like we are on the flowing end of deprivation of our rights.
Yeah.
And that's where these ideologies find fertile ground, because they have representatives who may never use the term incel, but or men's rights, but their beliefs and what they're legislating jives with these really scary philosophies. Yes. So that's why we really have to pay attention, because this is violence and oppression of women straight up. So stay alert, ladies.
Yes,
it's a dangerous world out there.
Yeah.
And men, we need you as allies.
Yes.
If you know a guy like this, please try to talk to him. Try to talk some sense into him. This has the potential to be really dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. Take good care of yourselves.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's,
I need another break after this one.
Man, I wish it weren't 10 in the morning, because I'd have a drink after that. So anyway, everybody.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, Jen.
It is. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Don't forget to like us, subscribe, give us a good review, all of the things.
Yay. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, fuck. What's the ID?